The wind didn't howl. That was the first thing he noticed. It just pressed, a solid, heavy silence, broken only by the groan of timber and the sharp, snapping cold. Elias Thorne stood at the edge of his claim, a small patch of Nebraska Territory, and looked west. The sky wasn't the color of snow. It was the color of old bone, of a deep, endless bruise. It was November 1840, and the air felt dead. He was a man of quiet habits, 50 years old. A face lined more by observation than by laughter. He'd come from Kentucky, not for gold or glory, but for quiet. He'd seen bad winters before. He'd seen blizzards that could bury a cabin, but this felt different. It wasn't a storm coming. It was a season settling in, a deep, permanent cold. For weeks he'd watched the animals. The squirrels were frantic, their caches overflowing. The geese had left earlier in louder, more desperate flocks. The muskrats built their lodges thicker. Nature was whispering. No, it was shouting, but only if you knew how to listen. He walked back to his simple cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney of his nearest neighbor, Sam Higgins, a quarter-mile away. Sam was a good man, loud, friendly, sure of his place in the world. He believed in hard work, a full woodpile, and a sturdy roof, the modern solutions. Elias spent the next day not chopping more wood. He began to dig. He chose a spot 20 paces from his cabin, on a slight rise where the earth was dry. He marked out a rectangle, longer than a man, wider than his shoulders, and he started cutting into the prairie sod. The work was brutal. The ground was tough, woven with roots. His shovel bit scraped and lifted. Pile by pile, a hole took shape. Sam Higgins came by 2 days later, his wagon rattling. He reined in his horses, his breath puffing white in the cold. He watched Elias waist-deep in a trench, throwing dirt. "Thorne," Sam called, a grin spreading. "Finally planting that giant potato you're always talking about?" Elias stopped. He leaned on his shovel. He didn't smile. Something like that. Sam climbed down, walked over to the edge. He peered in. "Well, I'll be. You digging a root cellar? A bit far from the house, ain't it? And a mighty strange shape for a cellar." "It's not a cellar," Elias said, his voice even. "Then what in creation is it?" Elias looked at the hole. Then he looked at the bruised sky. "A bed." Sam's laughter was loud, a sharp bark that echoed in the still air. "A bed! You're digging yourself a grave to sleep in. Elias, the winter's got your mind already, and it ain't even properly here yet." He shook his head, still chuckling. "We got cabins, we got stoves, we got good wool blankets. My Martha's knitting a new one right now. That's how you face a winter. Not by lying in the dirt like a tater." Elias didn't argue. He just nodded. He'd learned long ago that explaining a feeling, an instinct, was like trying to explain the color of the wind. Impossible. "Suit yourself," Sam said, clapping him on a muddy shoulder. "But when you're froze solid in that mud hole, don't say I didn't warn you to act sensible." He laughed again, climbed back onto his wagon, and rattled off towards home, towards his warm cabin and his modern solutions. The digging continued. The hole grew deeper, shoulder high, then over his head. He lined the bottom with flat stones from the creek. He spent days gathering grass, dry and brittle, stuffing it into burlap sacks. He made a frame from young, flexible willow branches, arching it over the pit. He layered the sod he'd cut, the grass side down over the frame, creating a thick, insulating roof. He left a small opening at one end. It looked, to any passing eye, like a low, grassy mound. A burial mound. His final trip to the trading post sealed it. Men were talking, the usual winter preparations. Extra flour, salt, nails. But the tone was light, jovial. A big winter meant big stories come spring. They saw Elias buying candles, a great quantity of hardtack, and 2 extra axes. Not for cutting wood, for something else. "Stocking up, Thorne?" the storekeeper asked. "Think we're in for a long one?" "I do," Elias said quietly. A younger man, new to the territory, overheard. He smirked. "Heard you're building a dirt bed, old-timer. That true?" You gonna marry a prairie dog? The small crowd in the store chuckled. Elias paid for his goods. He looked at the young man, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. The earth holds its heat, he said simply. Then he left. The first snow came. Not a gentle fall. A hard-driven sheet of white that erased the world. It fell for a day, then stopped. The temperature plummeted. The world became silent and iron-hard. Sam Higgins came trudging through the new snow a week later. His face was no longer laughing. It was pinched with cold. "Chimneys drawing poorly," he grumbled. "Burning wood faster than I figured. This cold's got teeth, Elias." Elias just nodded from his doorway. You still planning on using that thing?" Sam asked, jerking his head towards the innocent-looking mound of snow-covered sod. "I am," Elias said. Sam shook his head. He didn't laugh this time. He just looked confused, a little worried. "It ain't natural, Elias. It ain't the way. We build up. We build walls, roofs, fires. We don't dig down. Digging down is for the dead." That night, the wind finally found its voice. It began to howl, not just a wind, but a screaming force that shook the cabin walls. The temperature dropped again. Elias sat by his fire, listening to the fury outside. He looked at his sturdy door, his thick walls. He looked at the small, dark opening in the grassy mound, visible only as a deeper shadow in the night. He faced a choice. A clear, cold choice. Stay in the cabin, the normal place, the sensible place. Trust in the timber and the fire. Follow the pattern of every man he knew. Or go outside, into the screaming dark and the killing cold, and lower himself into a hole in the ground. A bed of earth and grass. One path was accepted, understood. It was what men did. The other looked like madness. It looked like surrender. It looked to Sam and everyone else like a man giving up on civilization itself, choosing a grave before his time. The wind shook the door in its frame, a long, shuddering moan. The fire flickered. The decision was here, and he knew with a certainty that was colder than the ice on the window that this would not be a normal storm. This was a test. And those who followed the normal path, the sensible modern path, they were going to pay for it. The invisible work began the moment he made his choice. He moved his essentials, not in a panic, slowly, methodically. The burlap sacks of dry grass went in first, packed along the sides of the stone floor. Then the furs, the heavy wool blankets, his candles, tinder box, a small tin of food, and a water skin. He left the cabin stocked, but his life now centered on that grassy mound. Every evening, as the sun died in that bruise-colored sky, he would go out. He would brush the snow from the sod roof. He would crawl inside the small opening, feet first, pulling a woven grass mat behind him to seal the entrance. Inside, it was dark, close. The air smelled of earth, dry grass, and stone. It was silent. The howling wind became a distant murmur, the cold a faint memory held at bay by 4 feet of solid, insulating earth. He would light a single candle. The tiny flame warmed the immediate air, just enough to take the edge off. He would eat a little hardtack, drink a little water, then blow out the candle. In the absolute darkness, wrapped in furs on his bed of grass, he would listen to his own breath, to the deep, quiet hum of the earth holding its residual summer heat. It was not warm, but it was not deadly. It was survivable. Outside, the world was dying. The storm did not end. It deepened. Day after day, the snow fell. The wind sculpted it into impossible drifts, burying fences, then windows, then whole walls of cabins. The temperature became a living enemy. It cracked trees with sounds like gunshots. It made the air hurt to breathe. Elias would emerge each morning, a slow resurrection from the earth. He would check his cabin. The fire in the stove had to be kept going, a decoy of normal life, a sink for his wood. He saw no one. Sam's chimney, a quarter-mile away, stopped smoking on the 8th day. A deep, cold dread settled in Elias's gut. He knew what that meant. He tried. One morning, when the wind briefly stilled, he strapped on his snowshoes. He fought his way through chest-high drifts towards Sam's place. The journey took hours. What he found was a white, silent mound. The cabin was completely buried, save for a ghost of the chimney stack. No sound, no movement, just the immense, suffocating weight of winter. He turned back. There was nothing to do. The work had been invisible, and now it was over. Back at his own claim, the test reached its peak. A new front rolled in, bringing a cold so intense it felt like the sky was shattering. His cabin, once a symbol of safety, became a trap. The fire, no matter how he stoked it, could not fight the cold leaching through the logs. The wood pile was shrinking fast. He was burning his future just to stay in the present. And then, his moment of near failure. He was in the earth bed. A candle burning, a storm screaming overhead. He had sealed the entrance mat poorly. A tiny gap, a finger of that killing cold found its way in. It was a subtle thief. He didn't feel it on his skin. He felt it in his bones. A deep, creeping numbness. A lethargy that whispered how easy it would be to just sleep. The candle flame guttered. This was how it happened, not in a dramatic collapse, in a slow, quiet giving up. The cold was winning. He stirred. He forced his mind to focus. The gap. It had to be the gap. With fingers that felt like wood, he fumbled with the grass mat, pushing more sacks against it, sealing the invisible leak. He huddled deeper into his furs. He waited. The earth's warmth, stored and constant, slowly fought back. The deep chill retreated inch by inch. It was a close thing, a very close thing. He learned a brutal lesson. Perfection wasn't a goal. It was the requirement. A single mistake had almost been the only one he'd ever make. The weeks blurred into a monochrome nightmare of white and grey. His world was the cabin for brief, frozen chores, and the earth bed for survival. He lived like a creature of the ground, quiet, patient, waiting. Then, one morning, the silence was different. The pressure was gone. The wind had stopped. A weak, pale sun broke through the clouds. The deadly winter was breaking its grip. Elias emerged. He stood on the sod roof of his bed, now a seamless part of the snowy landscape. He looked towards Sam's place. No movement. He looked at his own cabin, weathered but standing. He had lived. Not comfortably, but he had lived. Days later, a party from the distant fort arrived on massive snowshoes, checking on settlers. They found Elias, thin but alert, tending a small fire outside his cabin. They dug out Sam Higgins's cabin. They found Sam and Martha and their 2 boys, preserved by the cold, but gone. The modern solutions had not been enough. The wood had run out. The walls had betrayed them. The fort men saw Elias's grassy mound. They asked about it. He told them. They didn't mock. They looked from the tragic scene at the Higgins cabin to the odd, low mound. They looked at Elias, alive. Understanding dawned in their eyes. A grim, respectful understanding. There was no celebration, no glory. Just a quiet, profound validation that echoed louder than any laughter ever had. The wrong decision had been the right one. The madness had been the method. The lesson wasn't about dirt or grass. It was about listening. When the world whispers a warning, most people argue with it. They trust the pattern, the common sense. But sometimes the context changes, and what looks like a step backward, digging a hole, rejecting the modern wall, is the only step forward there is. Those who observe, who prepare in silence, are often the only ones left to hear the silence after the storm. So, I'll ask you 2 things. First, when have you seen someone do something that seemed strange, even foolish, only to realize later they were seeing a danger everyone else missed? And second, just out of curiosity, where in the world are you listening to this story from today?